Only families live here. Useless sponsors can get out. I calmly accepted those words. Finally, it was worth enduring for 18 years. At that moment, 2 men in suits entered from behind me. What? My name is Patricia. I am 74 years old this year. I live with my only son, Walter, my daughter-in-law, Shirley, and their son, Milford, making it a household of 4 people across 2 generations. To the outside world, it may seem like we live a lively life in a multi-generational household, but since the loss of my husband, I often feel lonely and tend to get down. Walter is quiet-natured, gentle, and avoids conflicts. In contrast, my daughter-in-law Shirley is strong-willed and quick to complain if something displeases her. Milford seems busy with his job, rarely at home on weekdays or weekends. Shirley is especially harsh towards me, throwing cruel words my way. As a timid person, her words sting like little thorns, making me shrink. I've never reproached Shirley. Instead, I'm often on the receiving end of her nitpicking. As a result, I often find myself complying with Shirley, feeling like her housekeeper. Shirley is stingy with money, but also vain, often going out to lunch in the city center with friends. She always asks me to do chores like cleaning and laundry when she goes out. Moreover, when heading to the city center, she makes me drive her to the station. Shirley naturally gets into the back seat, as if I were a taxi driver. And she seems to misunderstand that living together in this 2-generation household is her way of repaying me. Shirley often says, "I'm living here for your sake. After my husband's death, I wanted to live quietly alone. However, I couldn't express this wish to Shirley or Walter. Come on, get up quickly." It seems like she's waking up Walter, who was working late last night. Shirley's grating voice echoes from the couple's bedroom. As usual, she's in a bad mood today, waking up Walter at the same time on a holiday and hurrying him to get ready. I spoke to Walter, who was washing his face in the bathroom. "Are you okay?" Walter had big bags under his eyes. "I'm fine. Got about 5 hours of sleep." Walter smiled gently while drying his face with a towel. Lately, Walter's complexion has been particularly poor. His father, unconcerned about the family's worries, kept saying, "I'm fine," and continued working. One day, he suddenly collapsed and passed away. I knew all too well that "I'm fine" is a danger signal. Fine is not fine at all. As Walter washed his face, memories of that time came back, and my chest tightened. I wish I could let him rest more on holidays, but I doubt I can say that to Shirley. Loud footsteps come from upstairs. The way of walking conveys her bad mood. It must be Shirley. As I show my displeasure, Shirley appears in the bathroom. Her brows are furrowed, not bothering to hide her dissatisfaction. "Hurry up! I'm going to be late for my appointment with friends." Walter, with a downcast look, put the towel back. "Sorry, I'll get dressed right away." The meek Walter quickly left the scene. Shirley thrust a note at me. "Patricia, here. This is the shopping list. Get these." Shirley pushes the note into my hands without looking me in the eye. "Yes, I understand. Have fun with your friends." I forced a smile as best as I could. Shirley hands me the note, but no money. The payment comes out of my pension. Shirley adds more requests as she leaves, not waiting for my reply. I sigh heavily. Watch her brazen back disappear. As Shirley was leaving, she called out loudly from the entrance, "Make sure you clean the shower so I can use it when I get back." The door closed, and she left. Ever since we started living together, Shirley has never been shy around us. When we first moved in together, "Don't hold back," I said to Shirley. It seemed to have been completely unnecessary. The longer we lived together, the more Shirley's aggressive nature became apparent. Her true colors were showing. Shirley is not good at household chores, especially cooking. I ended up preparing all the meals, including Milford's lunch. Additionally, Shirley is picky about food. If she dislikes a dish, she would say, "I told you I can't eat this," and leave the table. She often complains about other chores too. Stains on the laundry, missed spots on the window glass, no spare toilet paper, no stock of her favorite juice. She scatters complaints at me all day. I keep telling myself that she's the woman my only son Walter chose. I always try to respond with a smile and keep things calm. However, Shirley's recent behavior has become even more thoughtless and exhausting. Shirley goes out with friends almost every week. She hardly did any housework or childcare from the beginning of her marriage. She spent money on her appearance and was attentive to it. Shirley is cheerful and glamorous when outside. She seems popular with men, often receiving calls from men I don't know. I suspected Shirley of infidelity, but Walter seems to trust Shirley unconditionally. Whenever I warn him, "I'll handle it," he gives an unreliable reply. A while after Shirley and Walter went out, Walter returned. He had been called to drive Shirley to the station. Walter came in holding several shopping bags. Seeing my surprised face, Walter sighed. "These are sweets Shirley is going to give out at her high school reunion next week." "But there are so many." "Apparently, there are more in the car. Meant for everyone at the reunion. They're from a famous Western confectionery shop. It must have cost a considerable amount." Walter muttered as if he understood. Shirley has her own status to maintain. She doesn't want to be seen as struggling financially, living with her parents-in-law. Sorry. Let her have her way, please? After bringing the bags inside, Walter slumped on the sofa. I decided to go shopping as Shirley had asked. I could use the car as I can drive. However, Shirley always complains the cost of gas is a waste, so I often endure and walk for most errands. The walk back with heavy bags always feels long, taking several breaks on the way home. During the walk, I heard Milford's voice. "Granny, let me carry that for you." Turning around, Milford was standing there and took the shopping bags from my hands. Milford looked stern. "Why didn't you use the car? Did Mom complain about the gas money?" I just smiled without answering. Since Milford started working last spring, we hardly see each other at home. Milford comes home late and leaves early in the morning. He often works on weekends, and when he has a day off, he goes out, so he's rarely at home. It's rare for Milford to be at home like today. Milford started putting away the groceries in the kitchen quickly. His movements were lively and full of happiness. As I was helping in the kitchen, Milford shyly spoke to me. "Actually, there's someone I want you to meet." I was filled with emotion, realizing he had grown up so much. It seemed like just a little while ago he was a young child. And now, he's talking about introducing someone special. I'm thinking of bringing them home next week. While storing vegetables in the fridge, Milford talked, seemingly embarrassed. "Granny, I've been thinking about something for a while now." I wondered what was on Milford's mind. Before I could probe further, Milford, with an air of excitement, continued. "I can't talk about it yet, but I'm going to bring her over to the house." I couldn't help but smile at his words. I was curious about what Milford couldn't talk about. But what really intrigued me was which lady Milford would bring home. Perhaps his days off were spent on dates. The thought was quite heartwarming. It would be the first time Milford brought a woman home. That day, I was in such high spirits that even Shirley's usual nagging didn't bother me as I went about my chores. That evening, Milford talked about the woman he wanted to introduce to Shirley and Walter. Walter seemed pleased, but Shirley, without a smile, frowned in displeasure. Stealing a glance at Shirley's expression, I felt a sense of foreboding. The next day off, while I was cleaning the entrance, Milford appeared. Beside him stood a pale, demure young woman. "Granny, this is Anastasia." Milford introduced her to me, a joyful expression on his face. "Nice to meet you. I'm Anastasia." Anastasia bowed politely. Her greeting was beautiful. She seemed very well-mannered. Her parents must have raised her right. I led the two of them to the living room. To my surprise, Shirley seemed in good spirits, asking them how they met. I was in the kitchen preparing coffee, comforted by the sound of Shirley's laughter. Shirley's urging me to hurry with the coffee didn't bother me. Just as I was about to bring in the coffee, I heard Shirley's critical tone. Anastasia's face had turned pale. What had happened? Don't joke. What's this about a shotgun marriage? So it was true. Anastasia was carrying Milford's child, and they were planning to marry. Shirley was opposing it. I, too, was taken aback. Moments ago, the atmosphere was amiable, but now it was icy. Milford looked down, biting his lip. Milford pleaded in a strained voice. We're serious about this. We may be young, but please allow us to marry. Anastasia joined in, begging, Please. Their earnestness was palpable. I wanted to support them, but I knew Shirley would oppose if I said anything. Yet, I wanted to stand by them. I struggled to hold back my tears. Walter spoke up. Of course we support your marriage. For the baby's sake. It's better to marry soon. Milford's face brightened. Thank you, Dad. Milford and Anastasia exchanged smiles. Shirley looked openly displeased. A shotgun marriage? How unsightly. Explain yourself properly. Anastasia, at a loss for words, glanced down at the table. Milford gently placed a hand on her shoulder. We were in a serious relationship thinking of marriage. The baby was a happy coincidence for us. A child doesn't force a marriage. Isn't that right, Patricia? Shirley turned to me with a sarcastic smile. But if they've decided, all we can do is support them. Shirley remained silent, then left the room. An awkward silence filled the living room. Walter stood up, patting Milford's shoulder. Shirley will understand. I'll talk to her. Milford nodded slightly. I was clueless about what Shirley was thinking, feeling increasingly anxious. The next day, Walter dropped a bombshell on me. Patricia should move out. From now on, it will just be us and Milford's family living here as a two-family household, she said to him. Shirley also said, Don't tell Patricia. Walter told me what Shirley had said. I was dumbstruck and silent, holding my head. What shocked me further was the fact that Shirley was managing all of my late husband's estate, including the house. The entire estate had been left to Walter, and Walter, he just does whatever Shirley says. That meant Shirley had control over all our family's assets. I realized I had been stripped of everything by Shirley. I had no assets or property of my own. Shirley even started harassing me. She would turn off the water heater right when I was about to shower. I had no choice but to endure cold showers. There were times when the washing machine was unplugged and I had to wash clothes by hand. It was all to drive me out. The harassment gradually escalated. I knew I had to confront Shirley to protect myself. Fortunately, I had a few tricks up my sleeve. I decided to plan my next steps in consultation with Walter, but dealing with Shirley wouldn't be easy. Will it work? The weeks since I decided to confront her flew by. When things had calmed down a bit, Shirley called Milford and Anastasia. Milford and Anastasia sat at the living room table, looking uneasy. Shirley, seated opposite them, had a calm expression. Once everyone was gathered, I expected Shirley to deliver my death sentence. Shirley finished her coffee in one gulp, crossed her arms, and said, Well, I suppose it's pointless to oppose, but when exactly are you planning to get married? Everyone was stunned by Shirley's change of heart. We want to do it soon, considering Anastasia's condition. Shirley's composure was almost frightening. So this means we're finally done with parenting, doesn't it? Shirley turned to face me in the kitchen and shouted, We're going to live as a family. Unneeded sponsors, get out. I calmly received her words. Finally, it was worth enduring these 18 years. Then, 2 men in suits entered from behind me. What? The story goes back 2 weeks. I was invited to Anastasia's condominium where she lives alone. Milford was also there. They probably visit each other's home frequently. In the bathroom, their matching toothbrushes were lined up, which was endearing. Anastasia's belly was slightly bulging, and she was gently caressing it. Milford, seating me at the dining table, with a serious look, said, "There's something important I need to discuss. A conversation you don't want Shirley to overhear, right?" Milford silently nodded, a slight smile on his face. Anastasia also smiled thinly, looking pleased. Milford offered me the coffee he had brewed and continued, "Why don't you live with us? Dad told me that Mom is trying to kick you out." I was taken aback by his sudden proposal. I almost dropped the mug I was holding. Milford looked at me seriously. "But I can't rely on you." Milford's expression remained serious. Anastasia held Milford's hand, as if to encompass it. Milford was earnest about wanting me to live with them. I straightened up involuntarily. "I've always thought about it since I was a child. Granny, you were always treated badly by Mom. I couldn't stand it." Indeed, Shirley is strong-willed and assertive. "Dad never talks back. I can't just watch Granny being mistreated by Mom." "I'm fine. Thank you for worrying. Remember when I first said I wanted to introduce Anastasia to you, Granny?" I remember the day Milford said he wanted to introduce Anastasia. It was a determined statement that stuck in my mind, but I had forgotten it until now. "It was something you've been thinking about for a long time." I always thought I wanted to help Granny when I grew up. So Milford had been thinking about that. I felt tears welling up. "Mom is always cold and rude to Granny, making snide remarks, but kicking you out? That's just too cruel." Milford was, it turns out, really that concerned about me. He leaned forward, staring into my eyes. "Come live with us. There's no need for Granny to suffer alone in that house." When I didn't respond, Anastasia looked at me with a serious expression. "I heard about Granny from Milford. Please, come live with us. I'm so touched, really touched, but I don't want to be a burden on your lives." "That's not a problem at all. We need your experience in parenting, and it would be so reassuring to have you with us." Milford and Anastasia then said, "Please come live with us," asking together. Tears welled up in my eyes from their sincere feelings and kindness towards me. "Thank you. I understand your feelings. I will live with you." "No, please, let me live with you," I asked earnestly. And so it was settled that I would live with Milford and Anastasia. I braced myself for the final battle with Shirley. Leaving Milford's condo, I felt relieved knowing that even if Shirley kicked me out, I had a place to go. My arsenal wasn't just that. Standing behind Shirley now were two men, a dignified older gentleman and a tall young man, both on my side. Just now, finally, it was worth enduring for 18 years, I said. Shirley stood dumbfounded, as if deflated. "This man here is the landlord, a childhood friend of my late husband." The dignified man nodded in greeting. "This land is actually leased." I explained that the condition for renting it was that I lived here. Everyone looked puzzled. I recounted how the landlord and my husband had argued over who would marry me. Ultimately, my husband chose me. The landlord, wanting to see me, lent the place on the condition that my husband and I continued living here. I explained it all in order. Ever since then, I've been living here. "Wow, Granny, you were really cherished." The landlord blushed. Shirley, unable to speak, trembled her lips. "So, everyone has to leave here, right?" "That's right. Shirley, for the 18 years we've lived together, I've always endured. But now, it's over." "That's absurd. What about the tenant's right to stay? You can't just tell us to leave." Shirley argued vehemently. "Normally, yes, but I've discussed it and chosen to terminate the lease myself." Shirley clenched her fist, her face turning red. "I've lived here a long time, but it's time for me to move on. I'm going to live with Milford and the others." "Unbelievable! I won't allow this." Shirley exploded in anger. "Who's being ridiculous? Your obvious disdain for Anastasia's pregnancy, your harassment towards me, your attitude towards Walter? You've been awful." Shirley slammed her hands on the table. "Shirley, let's get a divorce." Walter spoke seriously to Shirley. She stood, mouth agape, losing momentum. I can't stand living with Shirley anymore. I want a divorce. What's all this about? Right now, the problem is that this house is gone and Patricia is going to live with Milford. Mother, we will live with Milford and Anastasia. That's settled. Now, it's about me and Shirley. I don't want to live with her anymore. Shirley, usually submissive, was taken aback by Walter's sudden change. Why is this happening all of a sudden? Until now, Mother has endured Shirley's attitude. So, I endured too. But if Mother is leaving to live with Milford, there's no need to bear it anymore. I want to divorce Shirley. A tall man standing behind stepped forward, holding an envelope. This man is a detective. He's been investigating you for years. Walter opened the envelope, spreading its contents on the table. Shirley's face turned pale at the sight. Inside were photos and documents. The photos showed Shirley arm in arm with a young man she didn't know entering a hotel. Shirley was seen coming out of a nightclub in a photo. This is proof that Shirley was having an affair. I've been having her investigated regularly for quite some time. Lies. No, this is a misunderstanding. It doesn't matter if it's a misunderstanding or not. The investigation is conclusive. Shirley, you've been using household money for a young man. Walter handed Shirley a copy of the bank transfer details. I was amazed at how thorough Walter had been. How far had he investigated? Perhaps the most frightening enemy is Walter himself. His gentle face only made his relentless pursuit all the more intimidating. Shirley, either resigned or defiant, began to smirk. Well, it was for his future career as a singer. It's fine to support that, right? Walter shook his head and sighed. Then what about this photo? The photo showed the young man Shirley had been with entering a condominium with another woman. Shirley stared at the photo, shocked. Her hands trembled slightly. That man's been spending the money Shirley gave him on his own pleasures. Walter pulled out a digital voice recorder from the envelope. Here's a recording of him saying Shirley is an easy mark. Shirley, overwhelmed, held her head and closed her eyes tightly. Then she said, Lies, 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 she murmured repeatedly. Shirley, you were being deceived too, but that's no excuse. Shirley looked around at everyone with wide eyes. What am I supposed to do now? How am I supposed to live? That's for you to figure out. You have plenty of time to atone for your sins. I can't take this anymore. This life. Walter, usually quiet, raised his voice, causing Shirley to flinch and tear up. He stood up from his chair and glared at Shirley. I can't continue with Shirley anymore. Not just her attitude towards me, but everything she's done to my mother. Walter had been enduring for years. He was quiet, but vindictive. And a hard worker. Walter had been planning his revenge on Shirley for years. She had been under investigation for almost a decade. Now, Shirley was thoroughly defeated. She was speechless and collapsed onto the floor from her chair. Walter left the house without another word, followed by the landlord and the detective. No, Walter, come back! I'm sorry! Shirley kept crying incessantly. I urged Milford and Anastasia to leave the house. Shirley, left alone, was engulfed in deep regret and despair for her irreversible actions. Later, Shirley and Walter got divorced. Shirley strongly opposed it, leading to mediation. However, with all the evidence gathered, Shirley ended up paying a significant amount of compensation. Shirley demanded a share of the property, but she was confronted with the amount she had spent on the young man. Instead of compensating for the embezzlement, Shirley had to reluctantly give up her claim to the property. It was nothing but her own responsibility. Shirley, now homeless and burdened with debts, had to pay the compensation. She had accumulated a large amount of debt. Shirley now lived in a dilapidated apartment in a desolate suburban area. She worked tirelessly day and night in a factory during the day and as a security guard for road construction at night. She continued to demand money from the young man she had given money to. Give me back my money! And was warned for stalking. Despite the warning, she didn't stop her stalker behavior and could be arrested for threats. Walter continued to have her investigated, even after the divorce, receiving regular reports. Walter's vindictiveness was daunting. It had been half a year since I started living with Milford and Anastasia. Anastasia had given birth to a girl. I was helping with childcare and housework. Busy days, but I felt happy every day. One day, Walter came to visit. I hadn't seen him in a while, and he looked well and energetic. Walter, holding his grandchild, was brimming with smiles. "Since the divorce, have you been able to sleep well?" "Thanks to you, I think I've been getting about 8 hours." Walter showed a brightness I had never seen before. "I have some good news today." "What is it, some good news?" Anastasia's eyes sparkled. "I bought the land where we all used to live." I was surprised. "Really?" "I talked to the landlord and got it for a good price. I used Father's insurance money, which I had hidden from Shirley. Apparently, he was hiding everything so Shirley wouldn't find it. It turns out the condition for selling it was that Mother would live with us. Let's all live there together, Milford and Anastasia." I pinched my cheek involuntarily. "Ouch! It's not a dream." Milford and Anastasia were laughing. Thinking about our upcoming lively and happy life, I couldn't help but smile.
My name is Charlotte. I'm 26 years old and single. I don't have a full-time job. I've been a bit of a shut-in since middle school. I went to high school, but I dropped out, so I only have a middle school education. Since then, I've been living with my parents, working part-time jobs, and taking on work from online postings. I have an older brother named Sawyer, who's 3 years older than me, and he's the complete opposite of me. Good at sports, lots of friends, and the so-called outgoing type. My brother didn't want people to know he had a sister like me. He never brought friends home, and even if I happened to run into him and his friends at the convenience store, he'd ignore me. I thought it couldn't be helped and considered it like someone else's problem. Once my brother started college and moved out to live on his own, I stopped worrying about such things. Then, there was talk of my brother getting married. He would be turning 29. It wasn't surprising. Later, it was decided that my brother would bring his fiancée to our parents' house. Since I was home that day, I decided to join them. "Dad, Mom, I'm home." My brother arrived on time, and when he saw me sitting with our parents, he looked confused for a moment. "Sorry to intrude." His fiancée entered the house, seemingly unaware of my brother's attitude. Then looking at me, she said, "Huh," and looked puzzled. I could tell from her eyes that she was asking my brother, "Who is this?" He probably hadn't told her about me. "Thank you for coming all this way. I'm Sawyer's mother. This is his father." My mother introduced only herself and my father. The fiancé seemed satisfied and bowed politely, but still looked puzzled. My father didn't follow up on my behalf. My parents have always been harsh with me, who couldn't live up to my accomplished brother. When we were young, they'd say things like, "Your brother can do it, why can't you?" As if it was part of our education. But it changed as we grew older. Eventually, I was even called a money-sucking leech. It seemed that my parents were planning to ignore me at this meeting, too. "I'll go and get some more drinks." As my mother stood up to leave, she whispered in my ear, "Why are you here? Go back to your room." I had attended this meeting because I wanted to get along with my family in my own way, but it seemed to have backfired. Still, I couldn't just leave, so I stayed put. My brother's fiancée introduced herself as Isabella. She was the same age as me, 26, but a beautiful woman with a refined atmosphere, giving off a vibe that I shouldn't casually talk to her. My brother seemed a bit annoyed. He probably didn't like me being there. He introduced the woman to our father and mother, but he didn't talk to me at all. I felt like a ghost. When the conversation about the marriage was over, casual chatter naturally started, but my brother still acted like I didn't exist. And then Sawyer asked, "What do you usually do, Charlotte?" Before I could answer, my brother interrupted. "Wait, Isabella, you don't need to talk to her." That's what he said, clearly. Isabella looked a bit surprised. "That's right, don't worry about it." My mother chimed in.
Yeah, don't worry about it. She's just a stranger with a blood relation.
When my father said that, something inside me ended. A stranger. Huh. I thought, so reconciliation was impossible from the start. That's how the meeting ended. As if it didn't matter whether I was there or not. Soon after, my brother and Isabella got married and started building a house to live in together. My brother works at a famous company after graduating from college. He's still in his 20s, but his income seems good. Isabella is going to be a stay-at-home wife and has already quit her job. Around the time my brother's house was completed, we received an invitation to a housewarming party. It would be held with a limited number of guests, including Isabella's relatives and my brother's bosses. My mother was anxious, saying, "Oh, it's already finished. Time flies. We need to prepare a housewarming gift. What should we get?" My father said,
"We're family, so it doesn't have to be anything fancy."
And he casually turned over the invitation. Only my father and mother's names were on the invitation. My name wasn't there. My mother seemed to have noticed, but asked, "Charlotte is coming too, right?" I wondered what she meant. At the meeting, they had introduced me in such a horrible way. "It's fine if I'm not invited." I declined, but my mother insisted. "No, you're coming. I'll make arrangements." So I ended up going to the party. On the day of the party, it suddenly started raining. My parents and I took a taxi to my brother's house. My brother and his wife didn't come out to the front yard because of the rain, and welcomed their guests at the entrance. As soon as we arrived at my brother's house, my mother said to me, "You pay for the taxi," and got out of the car with my father first. Without umbrellas, they both hurried toward the entrance. Ah, so that's why, I thought. There was quite a distance between my brother's house and ours. I thought it was extravagant to take a taxi. I was the one called to pay for the car. After I paid, I ran towards the entrance, and Isabella asked me, "Who are you?" I had only met Isabella once before. Maybe she forgot me. I thought so, and introduced myself. "I'm Charlotte, Sawyer's sister." But she said with a smile, "Oh, the high school dropout. Neat. We didn't invite the parasite living off her parents." Isabella said this casually, with a smile. My brother, who had just returned from showing someone in, came out too. He said to me with disdain,
"Huh, why are you here?"
"Hey, Sawyer, I told you not to invite her. Why is she here?"
"Well, I don't know either."
My brother didn't want to invite me after all. And Isabella changed her attitude once she knew about me. Actually, she's worse than my brother and parents. Would it have been better if I didn't come? I asked my brother cautiously.
"Yeah, you're a stranger because of your low education."
"Actually, not finishing high school doesn't even count as an education, right? Could you please leave the property quickly?" Isabella followed up on what my brother said, like she was siding with him. Her expression remaining calm the whole time was truly terrifying. Understood. I turned on my heel. The taxi from earlier was gone, and since we weren't on a main street, it seemed difficult to find another one. I didn't have an umbrella. I trudged along, getting drenched in the rain. I could hear Isabella's laughter from behind. After a while, I returned home. My parents came back looking like they had a good time. They saw my face and asked, "Why did you leave suddenly? Couldn't even call a taxi for the way back? You're so useless." My mother complained, as if it were a matter of course. Sorry, I suddenly had a stomach ache. I lied to cover it up.
"For such a reason, you left on your own. You're hopeless. Make sure to give the gift later. You're an adult."
My father told me that. Speaking of which, I had prepared something to give at the party, but I brought it back without giving it. I wanted to send it by mail, but I didn't know the address. I could ask my parents, but the atmosphere was awkward, so I decided to contact my brother. "I want to send a gift. Can you tell me the address?" This was the only reply from my brother.
"I don't give my address to strangers."
"Right." I let out a sigh. Is it really fun to assert dominance over me in private? Not just embarrassing to introduce to others? I couldn't help but be amazed. It might not be just my brother who's sending these messages. Maybe Isabella is also typing and laughing out loud. Either way, it's ridiculous. I gave up on sending a congratulatory gift. With the meeting of my brother and his wife and their housewarming party, I decided to leave home. I realized I couldn't get along with my family anymore and decided to live on my own. I didn't have a full-time job, but I had some savings from my part-time work. I was able to rent a room for living alone. Since it wasn't much to live on, I decided to try streaming videos in my spare time. I was already interested in watching streams as a hobby, and was good at finding trends among popular streamers and ways to increase views. When I started doing it myself, I made tens of thousands a month, and the amount grew, covering my living expenses. I decided to invest the money I wasn't using. The investments went well, and I decided to try running a small company importing and selling goods. I was busy in a good way and fulfilled every day. I didn't have a family that would complain about me using the computer all the time. A few months later, I received a call from my parents, who hadn't contacted me since I left home. "We want you to help Sawyer financially," they said. "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious. I wondered what could have happened to the person who just built a new house. My parents slowly began to explain the situation. My brother apparently held frequent parties after building his new house, interacting with various people such as bosses, executives, clients, and Isabella's acquaintances. Among them, someone proposed an investment opportunity, and my brother ended up trusting the proposal. He wasted a large sum of money, lured by the promise of making big returns in just a few months. I was amazed. My brother had a decent job. So if he had just kept working hard, he wouldn't have made such a mistake. What a shame. Who is the person who recommended the investment? Isn't it a scam? No, it's not. It's one of Isabella's acquaintances. My parents seemed to completely trust Isabella. "How much do you need?" She was shocked when I asked. It was an amount that a company employee couldn't easily pay. "Is that really the amount my brother needs alone?" I asked my parents hesitantly, and as expected, they gave me the answer I feared. "We were also introduced to the same investment." My parents hesitated before responding. "I can't come up with that much money so easily, sorry." I tried to hang up the phone, but they clung on, saying, "We're your real family. Help us out in times like these." Real family? Too little too late. "Sorry, but I'm busy, and I'm a stranger to you, right?" With that, I hung up the phone. Later on, somehow, they found out, and my parents and brother's families showed up. The location was the office of the company I run. I was in a business meeting at the time. My secretary informed me, "There are guests here for you, President." "I don't have any other appointments. Who are they?" "They claim to be your family, ma'am." "What?" I shuddered. I apologized to the business partner I was meeting with and excused myself for a moment. When I went to the reception area, there stood my pregnant sister-in-law, Isabella, my brother, and my parents.
"You're running a company, huh? Well, it's much smaller than where I work."
My brother smirked and looked around the office. "Who are you?" I asked, pretending I didn't know them.
"What's with the attitude?"
My brother shouted, losing his temper. My mother intervened and explained, "We talked about this before, but we need your support. You're running a company, so you can help us out, right?" My mother shamelessly asked for money, as if it was the most natural thing in the world.
"Yeah, it's an important time for our family. Isabella is about to give birth."
"The child's growth isn't good, so we need to see a good doctor. Please, Charlotte." My father and Isabella chimed in, acting as if it was my duty to pay off everyone's debts. Employees occasionally walked by the reception area, glancing over with concern. Wanting to get rid of them as quickly as possible, I said, "Please leave. You're causing a disturbance." My brother exploded with anger again.
"What? We're a disturbance? We came all the way here, and that's how you talk to your family?"
he yelled. The employees passing by stopped in their tracks. Facing them My brother started to make a scene.
Do you all know? This girl dropped out of middle school. She was a shut-in. Neat!
He seemed intent on humiliating me if I didn't give him the money. However, the employees responded with words my brother didn't expect. We know. Everyone knows the president's background. Me too. The president hires many people from similar situations. Is there a problem? My brother, who usually socializes only with highly educated and high-income people, seemed caught off guard and stammered. Instead, my father said,
What a pathetic company. Just a gathering of needs.
My brother chimed in.
Exactly. Companies that do business with a place like this can't be any good either.
He yelled loudly. At that moment, the president of the company I was meeting with, who had been waiting in the reception room, came out. He must have heard the shouting. My brother's face went blank and then turned pale as he looked at the man. He lowered his gaze. What's wrong, Sawyer? Isabella asked my brother.
Idiot, don't say my name.
My brother whispered to Isabella, but it was too late.
Sawyer! Sawyer! Oh, it's you!
The company president walked straight up to my brother and looked at his face.
You're the guy who always follows Mr. Long, the division manager, right? We owe a lot to your company.
His company was also a client of my brother's company. My brother was sweating profusely from every pore on his face.
That's... Oh, I guess I'm not memorable since we're not a decent company.
When the president threw my brother's words back at him, my brother went,
Ugh,
and froze up. My father, mother, and Isabella also sensed the trouble and fell silent. I apologized to the president again, ignoring them. I'm sorry for taking up your valuable time. I'll ask them to leave.
Oh, are you sure? I have time today, so I don't mind waiting. You can prioritize talking with your family.
No, they're not my family. I glanced at my parents' and brother's family as I said this. They're complete strangers. After that, my parents' and brother's family were kicked out of the company. Maybe they were stunned by the exchange with the company president, but they left quietly. As for how my job was exposed, I was curious, so I looked into it and found out that Isabella was the cause. She had a friend who was well informed about investment-related information and always had her antenna up. There was a young woman in her 20s who was making a name for herself as a talented trader and company owner. Isabella was surprised when she saw a photo in the media and realized that this woman was her husband's sister, who she had heard was a middle school dropout and neat. Isabella told my brother and parents about this and suggested they ask me for money. Since I was busy during the day and didn't answer the phone, and I didn't call them back after they asked me for money, they came to my company. I had been treating them like complete strangers, so I decided not to get involved with them anymore. But I couldn't help but look into Isabella. I was curious about her friend being involved in my parents' and brother's financial failures. That friend was Isabella's ex-boyfriend. In fact, they seemed to still be involved. By the way, the child in Isabella's womb wasn't my brother's, but the child of that investor.
No way.
My brother was devastated. It's natural to be upset since everything had been a lie. Furthermore, it seems she had been extracting money from several other men under the guidance of her ex-boyfriend. Of course, my brother and Isabella ended up getting a divorce. Isabella is now under police custody along with her ex-boyfriend. However, the lost money won't be returned anytime soon. Ever since the incident at my company, my brother's position at his workplace worsened. In his 20s, he was transferred to a so-called window side department and eventually resigned. He couldn't work there for long and eventually resigned. Possibly irritated by the financial failure and trouble surrounding my brother, my father got into trouble when the president witnessed him losing his temper with a subcontractor at work. After investigating his work attitude, he was fired. Apparently, he had been saying things like,
Junior high or high school graduates are worthless. And if you didn't graduate from a certain university or higher, you're not a real person.
Similar to what he used to say to me. So both my brother and father ended up losing their jobs. The family, or rather former family, whose income decreased, still contacts me saying, "Let's live together." By the way, I had them banned from entering my company's building, so they can't force their way in anymore. With everything that happened, we're still family, right? The unemployed trio tries various tactics to cling to me, but my answer is always the same. I don't know you. You're complete strangers to me. I have no intention of giving any other response in the future.
Boss, you all need to shut up. Always nagging at me. Yeah, I get it. I'm the bad guy here. Happy now?
Laughing flippantly, the person speaking to me was embarrassingly my husband. If I had known he was such a lowlife from the beginning, I never would have married him. But now, it's too late. As I was thinking this, an unexpected voice yelled at my stupid husband. What? My name is Emily, a 28-year-old office worker. I live with my husband Liam and we don't have any children yet. I also have my precious little chihuahua, Lulu, who I've had since I was single. She's a clever little troublemaker, always scratching at drawers to drag things out.
Oh, by the way, I'm having dinner with Ethan next Saturday night.
My husband mentioned this over dinner.
With your brother. You two are really close, aren't you?
Ethan is my brother. My husband and brother have been friends since elementary school and quickly became close because of their shared interests like soccer. Sometimes I even get jealous of how close they are.
Ethan told me the other day, has Emily's cooking ever made you sick?
Ugh, my brother is still as rude as ever. I was a bit annoyed by that comment. If you have an older sibling, you may relate, but I think there are two types. One is the type that dotes on the younger sibling. One of my friends has a younger sister and loves her even more than her parents do, she claims. The other type is a bully, always demanding what's yours. My brother falls into this category.
Huh? Not eating the strawberry? Well, I'll take it then.
The person who would casually swipe the strawberry off my cake that I was saving for last was my brother. Even now, it makes me mad. My brother and I have never really gotten along, but I do owe him one big thank you.
One of my friends wants your number. Some people have weird tastes, huh?
He said this with a sigh, handing over the contact info. That friend turned out to be Liam, my now husband. So my brother was like a cupid for our love. When we decided to get married, my drunken brother said to Liam,
"You sure about this? You can still back out. She's like a gorilla at home, you know."
To which my husband replied,
"You're the only one who thinks that. I've been interested in Emily for a long time."
That's what my husband told me. His words were met with a gross, oh, from my brother. What an awful brother. My husband Liam was a star of the soccer team and was quite popular in our generation. Thinking back, my brother was just as popular, but I never understood why. At home, he was arrogant, selfish, and gorilla-like. Wait, am I saying the same thing as my brother? Even after marriage, Liam was as kind as ever, and I was very happy. I didn't realize that this happiness was slowly beginning to crumble. One day, my husband came home visibly frustrated.
Oh, today was the worst.
Welcome back. Oh, what happened? It was rare for Liam to get this angry. Apparently, as he was about to get in the car to come home, he noticed a scratch on it. He said it wasn't there this morning, but he honestly wasn't sure when it happened.
I should have installed a dash cam.
My husband's car didn't have a dash cam. I had one in my car, but my husband has been driving his current car for nearly 10 years because he likes it. I had suggested getting a dash cam, but he said,
I have never been in an accident or anything, so I think I'm good for now.
He kept putting it off, saying things like that, but this time he seemed quite upset.
Emily, I'm sorry, but can you go to the car shop tomorrow and get a dash cam installed? I don't really understand machines.
Since I had the next day off from work and had no particular plans, I gladly agreed. The next day, my husband went to work in my car. I had driven my husband's car a few times, but as someone who usually drives a compact car, his larger car felt a little scary to me. That night, when I told my husband that the installation was successfully completed, he was in high spirits, saying,
Now I can feel safe no matter what happens.
Seeing his response, I thought to myself, that's right, I can feel safe no matter what happens too, and smiled a little. Soon after, my husband would fall into hell. Around this time, I noticed that my brother had been contacting me more often. It wasn't anything serious, just casual conversations like,
How have you been? Or are you getting along with Liam?
mostly we shared trivial updates about our lives. I found my brother's behavior a little strange, but I thought, maybe he's finally starting to find his little sister cute? Bro, it's great that you're friends with Liam, but you're going out drinking too much lately. When I said that, my brother went silent for a moment, then said,
Sorry. Naomi and I have been fighting a lot and I have things I want to talk about.
He laughed over the phone. Naomi is my brother's wife and my sister-in-law. My brother and Naomi were high school classmates and have been dating since then. I don't think of my brother this way, but he and the beautiful Naomi were known as the most attractive couple in school. I was also close to Naomi, as she was my senior in the same club, and we had been friends since our student days. Then, one day, something happened. I still remember vividly. It was a day of heavy rain from the morning, and my husband was in a bad mood as he watched the weather forecast.
Rain all day. I hate going to the company for negotiations today. The road is narrow.
His company doesn't have company cars. They reimburse for gas, but employees must use their personal cars for outside work. Recently, the company's performance has been improving, and the president has finally started considering buying a few company cars next year. He happily told me the other day, so I said to him, "Why don't you use my car today?" I realized after I said it that my car is pink and maybe it's too cute for my husband to drive. He seemed to think the same thing, hesitated for a moment, but then said,
Is that okay? Last time I drove Emily's car. It handled well. I'll take you up on that.
and he went to work as usual. Well, time for me to go to work too. With that thought, I left the house as usual. The rain was getting stronger, almost like a typhoon. My usual commute route looked like a different road in the heavy rain, even with the wipers on full blast, and today I was commuting in my husband's unfamiliar car. I shouldn't have switched cars, I thought. That's when it happened. With a loud thud, the car I was driving crashed into a utility pole. At first, I didn't understand what had happened, but when I slowly opened my eyes, I saw a passenger car right next to mine. That's right, that car suddenly jumped out from the side, and I swerved to avoid it and hit the pole. Then I lost consciousness. I thought I heard the sounds of police and ambulance sirens in the distance. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. "Hey, Ethan, Emily's awake." A familiar voice. It was my sister-in-law, Naomi. Naomi, why are you here? Where am I? Ouch! I felt a little pain, perhaps from hitting my head. My hands and feet moved properly. If I hadn't turned the steering wheel at the last moment during the accident, I might not be alive now. The thought sent chills down my spine.
Hey, Emily, stay still. Lie down quickly. I'm here with you.
My brother, with tears in his eyes for some reason, was sitting next to Naomi. Seeing my brother like that, Naomi chuckled. "Ethan, you're overreacting. Calm down." Looking at the two of them, I asked, more importantly, why are you two here? Where's Liam? At my question, the smiles on their faces vanished instantly.
The hospital tried to contact Liam first from your address book, but he didn't answer because he was at work, so they called me next.
My brother explained. I had written emergency contacts in my address book. First was, of course, my husband Liam. Second, after considering my parents, I chose my brother who lives nearby. Third were my parents. It seemed the hospital had contacted them from my belongings after I was rushed in. Then, the two of them looked at each other with awkward faces. "It's okay, big brother. I have a pretty good idea of what's going on," I told them. The day I drove my husband's car to get the dashcam installed, I felt something off the moment I got in. A strong perfume scent, familiar and unpleasant. That's right, our dog Lulu barked more than usual at my husband the other day, and I smelt the scent then. My woman's intuition kicked in, and I opened the dashboard. recent movie ticket stubs, and a single earring I didn't recognize fallen under the passenger seat. It seemed my bad feeling had come true. At my worst, the two looked surprised but said, "Calm down, okay?" My brother showed me something. I knew it. Afterwards, the doctor came into the room and examined me. There were no abnormalities in my brain or body. The pain in my head was from a scratch on my forehead, which would heal naturally in a few days without leaving a scar. I was relieved as I didn't want a scar.
It's near a miracle that you came out of that accident with only this. You're really lucky,
The doctor said. My brother and his wife were relieved at the test results, telling me to call them if I needed anything. After saying that, he and his wife went home. A while later, my husband Liam rushed into the hospital room looking frantic.
Emily, you had an accident? Oh, are you okay?
I explained to my husband what had happened and that I needed to stay in the hospital for a few days. Then my husband said,
Oh, it's not a big deal then. I had so many missed calls from the hospital, I thought I didn't need to rush here.
He sighed and said that to me. I stared at my husband with cold eyes and told him that I was thinking of going back to my parents' house to rest for a while after being discharged from the hospital. The moment I mentioned it, my husband's voice noticeably perked up.
Oh, that's great. You don't have to worry about me. Take it easy at your parents' place. I'll even come to pick you up. No problem.
His face was clearly delighted. Looking at him, I thought from the bottom of my heart that he was an idiot. As if I would worry about you. I had suspected it, but my husband was indeed having an affair. The fact that he could be so callous to his wife who might have lost her life showed that he was quite infatuated with his lover. His insistence on picking me up from my parents' house was a clear sign that he didn't want me to come home unexpectedly. Enjoy it while you can, you better be prepared. A few days later, my husband came to pick me up when I was discharged. We stopped by our house to pack and then headed straight to my parents' home. Usually, I would sit in the front passenger seat when going out with my husband, but this time I deliberately sat in the back.
Make sure you call me when you want me to pick you up.
Absolutely. I almost laughed at my all-too-obvious husband, but managed to hold it in. Yeah, I understand. Sorry that you'll have to use my car for a while. I didn't feel bad at all, but I spoke apologetically. My husband replied,
No problem at all. I like this car.
He cheerfully said he would take good care of my car and went home in a good mood. I like that car, but I will never drive it again. About a week after returning to my parents' house, I went back to our home. I'm home! I shouted loud enough to be heard in any room. Sure enough, I heard a commotion from the back room. A few minutes later, my husband came rushing out.
Hey, I told you to call, didn't I? Why did you come back all of a sudden?
He seemed quite flustered, almost angry. Oh, I forgot. Maybe it's because I hit my head in the accident. Sorry. But more importantly, I have something to talk to the person hiding in the back room. Can you bring her out? And hey, your clothes are inside out, I said with a bright smile. My husband's face turned pale in an instant, and then he finally realized that behind me were my parents, my brother and his wife, and even his own parents who had come all the way.
What? Why?
His father, a strict man, yelled, "Bring her out now." A few minutes later, after letting everyone into the living room, my husband and his lover awkwardly entered from the back room. No wonder they were uncomfortable. It was 2 against 7. My husband was overwhelmingly at a disadvantage. The two of them looked down and didn't say a word. Everyone, including me, was irritated. It's been a while, hasn't it? Maria, right? At my words, the two of them flinched. I knew this woman. She was a year younger than me in high school and was the soccer team's manager. My brother and I were a year apart, and my husband and Maria only overlapped for 1 year. She used to pick fights with me while waiting for Liam, my husband, after practice, even after he graduated and went to college. Emily, you're so tall and stylish. I'm really jealous. I'm so small, but Liam said he likes small girls, so it's surprising. She was the type to pick up fight with a smile on her face. That continued even after Liam graduated and went to college. When I contacted Liam the other day, he replied right away, and I was so happy. Please thank him for me, Emily. Or, they say that relationships between college students and high school students don't last long. Aren't you worried? Were some of the things she said Back then, I had an inexplicable confidence that my husband was head over heels in love with me, so I didn't pay any attention to her. That must have been frustrating for Maria. I was worried about work, and suddenly Maria started sobbing. Her silly way of speaking hadn't changed at all, and it irritated me greatly. I almost lunged at her, but a glance at my sister-in-law Naomi, who was sitting next to me, told me she felt the same way. She was forcefully holding down her right hand with her left. The two of them explained that Maria worked at the reception desk of one of my husband's company's clients. They had reconnected over old stories and started meeting alone after work, but they insisted that there was nothing suspicious about their relationship.
It was just advice, nothing more.
My husband kept repeating this like a mantra. Is he crazy? Has he been cursed? Oh, Maria, I saw the tag on your skirt when you came into the room earlier. Isn't it inside out? Immediately, both of them checked her skirt, but of course I was lying. They made a face as if they had been caught, but it was too late. However, my husband's shirt really was inside out. What kind of advice requires you to take off your skirt in someone else's bedroom? Are you stupid? I said that to the two fools. Whether they didn't like my attitude or were too flustered to understand, my husband snapped.
Where's the evidence? It's unfair to accuse us without any evidence.
He actually had the nerve to get angry? My parents, in-laws, and I were so angry that our faces turned bright red. It was clear that everyone was furious.
Hey, you've been noisy since earlier,
my brother said, and then he played a video on the TV. It was the footage from the dashcam on the day of the accident. The loud thud made it clear that the impact was quite strong. The other driver, perhaps in shock, initially refused to admit fault. At the hospital, I apparently raged that I wasn't at fault. The police showed the footage to my brother, who was nearby, and it clearly showed the other car speeding into me and running a red light just before the collision. This evidence led to the conclusion that it was almost entirely the other driver's fault. However, the footage before the accident clearly showed my husband and Maria happily driving together.
I don't want to go home yet.
Maria said, "You're really cute." My husband replied, stroking Maria's head at a red light. Then he said, "You're so helpless," and drove into a hotel parking lot. On another day, Maria said, "Work ended early. I wanted to see you. Is your wife okay with this?" My husband replied,
I told her I'm going out with Ethan, so it's totally fine,
and kissed Maria. Ugh! My mother-in-law started crying. Even though I had seen it once before, I felt nauseous.
I didn't know the inside of the car was being recorded. That's cheating.
My brother looked at my husband with cold eyes and said,
You know, Naomi has always been telling me that Liam is definitely cheating, but I always believed there was no way.
With a cold look, my brother stared at my husband. Naomi seemed to have stumbled upon an account on social media that looked like Maria's. There were no faces shown, but there were plenty of suggestive photos like a profile of my husband, the watch he wore, and the interior of his car. I immediately consulted my brother, but at first, he didn't believe it. I heard that this caused a lot of fights between my brother and his wife. Still, it seemed he had some doubts, and he told me that he had been contacting me regularly. The decisive factor was the dashcam footage from the day of the accident.
You know how I felt when I saw that footage? My brother asked.
My husband, after a brief silence, snapped back.
All of you are so annoying, always nagging. Okay, I was wrong. Happy now? Ha.
Oh, why didn't I notice what kind of a person he was? I wish I could go back to my youth. As I was lost in thought, an unexpected person yelled at my husband, who was laughing in front of me. It was not my brother, sister-in-law, or in-laws, but my daddy, who had been silently listening to the conversation.
Hey, you! Who do you think you are? What's with that attitude? What are you doing to my daughter?
My brother and I unconsciously trembled at the sight of Daddy like this. My parents are gentle people, especially Daddy, who once said, "Look, Emily, this flower is trying hard to live too." When I was young, I stepped on a flower, and he said this so quietly and kindly. He was kind, even to plants. There was only one time when Daddy, who was like a Buddha, lost his temper with my brother and me. I think it was when my brother and I didn't listen to Mom at all, and then a door in the corner of my memory seemed to open. My brother and I, who usually don't get along, vowed deeply at that moment never to make Daddy angry again. Ah, my husband, who had been so bold until now completely subdued by the sight of Daddy, who was completely different than usual. Standing like a guardian deity, Daddy was next to my mother, who was looking at my husband as if he were filth. Afterwards, my in-laws bowed deeply to our family and took my foolish husband home. By the way, Maria, the other woman, was sent home on foot. As they were leaving, my brother told my husband, "I will never forgive you for hurting my precious sister." He said it quietly. By the way, my husband used my brother as an excuse for his secret meetings with his lover, thinking that my brother and I were on bad terms and wouldn't pry too much. "I want to slap you with this right hand right now, but it would hurt my hand. You're not even worth that pain," said my sister-in-law Naomi. Naomi and I were former volleyball players. Unlike me, who was always a reserve, Naomi was the ace attacker. Just thinking about her slapping someone sends shivers down my spine. My ex-husband should consider himself lucky to have escaped with his life. After some time, our divorce was finalized. Thanks to my in-laws, my ex-husband reluctantly paid the compensation in the divorce settlement, spending all his money.
I'll buy a new car with the insurance money from the accident.
My ex-husband was all excited about this, but the insurance money for his old car wasn't enough to buy a new one. After paying me the compensation, he was left with just enough to buy a used compact car.
Oh man, driving a compact car is shameful.
My ex-husband, who had this prejudice, was happily driving my car even though his own car was totaled in the accident. The reason? Maria, his mistress, had said, "This car is so cute," and his happy face was clearly captured on my dashcam. Speaking of Maria, she seems to have borrowed money from her parents to pay me the compensation in the divorce settlement. Now, under her strict parents' watch, she's working non-stop to pay off the debt. Her relationship with my ex-husband continued for a while, but he became neurotic due to Maria's emotional ups and downs, quit his job suddenly, and now his whereabouts are unknown. Despite this situation, Maria's social media had a single line, "Finally, he's mine. I'll chase him forever." Yes, it seems like it was written only one word. It's like something out of a horror story. My ex-husband got involved with a terrible woman, but that's his problem now. It does not matter to me. As for me, I sold my tainted car and used the money as a down payment for a new one. I rented a place near my office and am living happily with my beloved dog Lulu. Come to think of it, Lulu never warmed up to my ex-husband. Maybe it was her animal instinct? I have been visiting my parents more often, and recently we celebrated their wedding anniversary with my brother and his wife. As I was serving a strawberry whole cake, I asked my brother, who was sitting next to me, "Brother, do you want a strawberry?" He replied,
"Yes, please."
Like a child. I looked at my brother eating the strawberry with a smile. It seems that from now on, my brother and I will get along well.
Hey, what's wrong, Jake? Mom, I might be done for. Our son Jake was hanging his head at the entrance as soon as he got home. My husband and I were shocked by the scene. We decided to take him to the living room and ask what was going on. He seemed to come alone today. I wondered where his wife Laura was. But the reason Laura was absent became clear when we heard his story. After a while, Jake regained his composure. My husband and I waited for Jake to speak. "Sorry for coming home so suddenly. I just can't take it anymore." "What happened? And Jake, have you lost some weight?" Yeah. He was always thin, but now he looked sickly thin. It wasn't normal. Then Jake revealed the reason behind it. "Actually, it's because of Laura." "Laura? What happened?" "Right now, she's taking most of my salary." "What? Most of your salary? Is Laura handling the finances?" "Yeah. You know I've always been bad with money, right? So I thought it would be better if Laura managed it. But recently, the money she's been giving me has been decreasing, and I can't afford lunch." Then she said she's been saving money because the electricity bill was high this month, and that she had to use the money to repair the vacuum cleaner. I couldn't stand it anymore and complained, but she said it's my fault for not earning enough. "I see. Jake, you're pathetic. So you're saying you've been doing whatever Laura tells you? If you're the man of the house, you need to take control. If not, the situation might get worse. I know. What my husband said was true. If you just follow your wife's orders, it can lead to misery. Although it might be harsh for Jake, who's mentally weak right now, he has to understand it. Jake seemed to understand as he was silently nodding. Then, Jake told us something else. Remember you said I looked thinner? It might be because I've been surviving on instant noodles for all 3 meals. You can't eat only instant noodles. No matter how convenient it is, you need to get proper nutrition. But all I'm given is instant noodles. It seems like Jake has been given only a small amount of money for the last month, and has been provided only with instant noodles for lunch. Ever since Laura suggested they needed to save money, Jake has been putting up with it. Of course, he tried to object, but the fact is that he was the one who asked Laura to manage the finances. It might be difficult for him to complain, given those circumstances. But, considering the situation, he can't dwell on that right now. Anyway, you're staying with us tonight. I'll give you a proper meal and even pack a lunch for work tomorrow. Thank you, Mom. With a sigh of relief, Jake, with tears streaming down his face, thanked me. Apparently, he told Laura he'd be staying at his parents' home for a while. In hindsight, it would have been better if he had confronted her about the difficulties of their current living situation, but given Jake's mental state, that was all he could say to her. It was my first time seeing Jake so broken down. I can't even begin to imagine the amount of stress he must have been under. After that, he ended up staying at home for a while, and due to his poor health, he had to take a leave of absence from work. When Jake took this leave, I learned that he had recently been going to the hospital. He said it was due to stress, so the hospital had advised him to take some time off. However, Jake had a fear of what she might do to him if he took a break from work, so he had continued working out of habit, which resulted in his current state. During Jake's leave of absence, he was living on disability. At least being at home meant he could save on meals, which he said would be a big help. But what's more important is that we still need to do something about Laura. However, there is something I'm worried about. If I get involved, it could potentially make things worse. Maybe they can resolve it by themselves. For a moment, the thought crossed my mind that it might not be good for me to intervene. But I quickly dismissed such thoughts. Jake was desperate enough to come to me in such a state, and it's not a situation where I could afford to hesitate. I should do what I can for Jake. Just then, I received a call from Laura. Hello, Laura? It's been a while, hasn't it, Isabella? Jake's there with you, isn't he? Could you tell him to come home? I'm sorry, but I can't do that. Why not? Jake is trying to abandon his duties as a husband, you know? Are you really okay with that? I don't think it's a matter of me being okay with it or not. If I just send him back, I don't think it will solve anything fundamentally. How about we set up a meeting to talk about this in the near future? And not just with me, but with your parents as well, so we could all sit down and discuss this. Oh, is that so? I see. So, you're not planning on sending Jake back, are you? Understood. I have some ideas too then. We'll talk again soon. With that, Laura hung up the phone. She has some ideas. That phrase stuck with me. What could Laura possibly be planning? Several anxiety-filled days passed. Then, one weekend, my husband Jake and I were relaxing when the doorbell rang. I thought it was the mail or something and checked the intercom monitor. I couldn't believe my eyes. There were Laura and her parents. What should I do? Luckily, Jake hasn't noticed yet. Maybe I can dodge the situation and pretend we're not home. That's what I was thinking. But then I heard, "What's wrong, Jake?" My husband called Jake, and when I looked over, Jake was shaking with his phone in his hand. I then looked at the phone Jake was holding, and there the screen displayed Laura with an incoming call. Jake seemed to be having a reflex of rejection. He couldn't answer the phone. So with Jake's permission, I answered the call. Hello? Oh? Why are you answering the phone? Jake is not feeling well today, so I picked up the phone for him. I see. In that case, I'm worried. So please, let us visit while we have our discussion. We're outside your house right now. I'm sorry. We're actually out at the moment. That's strange. If Jake's phone is there, but you're not home, how does that work? I'm not used to lying, and my lie was easily exposed. Isabella, there's no need to be so cautious. My parents and I are here to have a discussion with you. As she spoke, my husband moved towards the door. It won't help running away from this situation. Might as well settle it now, my curt husband said, opening the front door and welcoming Laura and her parents into our house. Their faces as they entered lacked any hint of a smile. In fact, it seemed as if they were glaring at us. We apologize for the sudden visit. We just heard something from our daughter and thought we should join the conversation. It was probably about something I'd said to Laura the other day. I had suggested we should have a discussion involving both our sets of parents. I hadn't expected them to come unannounced, though. In the tense atmosphere, the discussion began. We explained that Jake had asked Laura to manage their money, but due to her excessive frugality, he had suffered health issues and had not been provided with adequate meals. We also told them that he was currently under medical treatment. However, it seemed that Laura and her parents were convinced by this fact. That's all about Jake's situation. Is there anything you'd like to say? Laura's mother chimed in. But wasn't Jake the one who asked Laura to manage the money? Doesn't he bear some responsibility then? Of course, you're right. If Jake had managed it himself, we wouldn't have this issue. But don't you think surviving on instant noodles for all meals is a bit much? That's none of our business. Maybe it couldn't be helped in order to save money. Is that true, Laura? Yes, it is. I never waste money, but Jake often buys a lot of unnecessary things. What? I didn't buy anything. Stop lying, Jake. She laughed. What? So it was a lie. Just like he tried to pretend he wasn't home today. Like father, like son, I guess. What? Before we knew it, instead of a discussion, it had turned into a situation where Jake and I were being cornered. Every time Jake and I tried to argue, Laura and her parents would shut us down with another point. It seemed our opinions were not being heard, only their one-sided claims continued. Just then, my usually quiet husband, who had been silent until now, slammed the table. At the sound and his sudden action, everyone jumped in surprise. Can I say something? Laura, are you and your parents trying to say that it's all Jake's fault? I'm not saying that. I just think that if they are a couple, then they should lay everything out on the table and have a good, honest discussion. Then they might be able to get along again. Lay everything out. I see. I understand. You might be right. What? I'll talk to Jake again here. So, would you be willing to set up another discussion on a different day? I think everything will be clear by then. It seems you're a reasonable man, sir. All right. I apologize for my previous rudeness. How about 2 weeks from today for the next meeting? I don't think it's good to leave it too long. Sounds good. That will be sufficient. And so it was decided that the meeting would take place at a later date, as my husband had suggested. After the three of them had left, I turned on my husband furiously. Why would you say such a thing? It's as if you're admitting that Jake is in the wrong. Calm down. I didn't think Jake was at fault, nor did I particularly want to smooth things over. Then why? Don't you find it strange? Why go to such lengths to make up with Jake? Huh? She brought her parents with their complaints, all with the aim of reconciliation. In a situation like this, I wouldn't even consider reconciliation. He had a point. If they cared about their daughter, they would either discuss divorce or approach the situation more calmly. Perhaps there was another objective. As I pieced together the situation, I realized one thing. What makes Jake so essential to Laura and her parents? The first thing that came to mind was money. From what Jake had shared, he had a pretty decent salary. However, he couldn't go against Laura, so he wasn't able to get allowances or such. In that case, Laura and her parents might be depending on Jake's money. But recently, he had switched to disability benefits and had a separate account for his salary. If that's the case, they must be in trouble. Perhaps they made contact because they wanted Jake to come home quickly and secure his salary. After discussing with my husband, we reached that conclusion and immediately told Jake. Jake, if this continues, you'll be drained by that family. I think it's better to make a decision before that happens. I'm sorry, but this is something only you can decide. So think it over carefully. I understand. It was a hard decision, but Jake also had to move forward. Making decisions for oneself is crucial. About a week later, Jake came to a conclusion. Mom, Dad, I'm getting a divorce. My husband and I embraced Jake, honoring his decision and the courage it took. It wasn't an easy thing to do. He must have thought about various things. Whether this is the right decision or not, we don't know, but we will understand as we continue to live. At least, I thought it was a good decision. Then, we started helping Jake prepare for the divorce. We had to push the meeting back a little because it didn't seem like we would make it in 2 weeks. So, we told Laura's family. They made some snide remarks, but knowing that this relationship would soon be over made it bearable. Once everything was ready, we sat and waited for their call. Then, Laura and her father came to our house right away. What's this all about? I didn't hear anything about a divorce mediation. So, this is why you wanted to postpone the meeting. What a joke. Let me tell you, I'm not attending any of this mediation. My daughter will never get a divorce. Laura and her father were furious. It was a natural reaction since they thought there would be no divorce. But the wheels were already in motion. There was no stopping it now. Please, calm down, both of you. Our decision to divorce will not change. Please, leave now. You! Could you please stop? Besides, didn't you say you were going to lay everything out in the open? You're hiding something from us, aren't you? Like how you're taking Jake's money through your daughter. What are you talking about? Stop the poor excuses. We have all the information. It was a bit costly, but we had a detective investigate you. You quit your job last year, didn't you? You're living a pretty comfortable life, aren't you? Taking it easy with a job and living on Jake's money. You have your retirement savings, and there's no problem as long as you keep leeching off Jake. I'm sorry. Then my husband lost his temper. What good does apologizing do now? You've been using the money Jake earned through hard work for your leisure. There's no way I'd ever accept your apology. Laura, you too. If you wanted to help your father after he quit his job, why didn't you use your own money? Using someone else's money for that. Are you some kind of fraudster? Just get out. I don't want to breathe the same air as you for even a moment. Just get lost! With my husband's roar, Laura and her father quickly left. At that moment, it became clear that my husband was the angriest about this whole matter. And so, this incident came to a close. In the mediation that followed, we hired a lawyer and successfully got the divorce. Although not for the full amount, some repayment obligation was established, and Laura's family was ordered to pay. After the divorce was finalized, Laura and her father immediately started looking for full-time jobs. Due to his age, it seems like he is having a hard time finding work. Laura is balancing a day job and a night job, literally working without a break. Since then, Jake's condition has improved and he's returned to work. I was torn about how much I should help this time, but I now think it was good that I did. I want my child to be healthy after all. I don't know what the future holds, but I want Jake to know that he always has two allies.
I'm divorcing you because I have a real family. I'm relieved to finally get rid of you.
What are you talking about?
She gave me kids, unlike you, who can't even keep yourself neat, let alone have kids. I have a family worth protecting, a well-kept woman, and our adorable child.
Oh, I see. Well, you'll regret this.
I'll never regret it. For 10 years, I dedicated myself to taking care of my mother-in-law, Sylvia. I was exhausted and worn out, but my husband left me right in front of all the relatives during Sylvia's funeral. But thanks to Sylvia's will, he's about to experience a living hell. I'm Cordelia. I'm a 35-year-old housewife who married George 12 years ago. For the first 2 years, we both had incomes, but then Sylvia fell ill. I quit my job to move into my in-laws' home and take care of her. Their home was old and not suitable for caregiving. We had proposed renovating it into a 2-family home, but George said, "That's a waste of money. Let's save for our future children." Being young and just 2 years into our marriage, I thought, if I try hard enough, we won't need a renovation. But caregiving was physically demanding. I had no time to worry about my looks or manners. I think the only reason I persevered was that I had a good relationship with my in-laws. Initially, they were planning to hire a professional caregiver. George, however, pushed his opinion. If Cordelia takes care of Mom, it will be less stressful for her and save money. When I started caregiving, Sylvia would often ask me, "Are you okay with this? If George is forcing you, I can talk to him for you." Thankfully, Sylvia preferred doing as much as she could by herself. I took care of shopping, meal prep, cleaning, and yard work. I always felt a warmth in my heart for my in-laws, Sylvia and Ted. When I was gardening, Sylvia would make tea for me, and Ted would share tips on taking care of the yard. Losing my parents early in life made me really appreciate them. A while after we started living with my in-laws, George got a big job and started coming home late, even staying overnight at the office. His parents started saying, "What is George thinking, leaving the care of his parents to his wife while he's never home?" As George began to be away even on weekends for work, I once suggested, "If you work this much, you'll ruin your health. Sylvia doesn't need as much help as we thought, and I can get a part-time job." George responded condescendingly, "You've only worked full-time for a year or two. You won't make much with a part-time job. It's better for me to keep working, even if it's a bit much." He even added, "Mom and Dad might be going out of their way to make things easier for you, and you're not even concerned." I was quite annoyed, but thought he must be stressed and tired from work, so I apologized and ended the conversation. With lots of free time, I studied caregiving on my own and did some minor DIY renovations for it, consulting Ted. Years went by and Sylvia's condition gradually worsened. Eventually, I was spending all my time caring for her. Ted used to help but had back issues. One day, Sylvia bashfully asked me, "Cordelia, would you mind helping me with the bathroom and shower? It's a bit embarrassing to ask Ted." I had always admired their relationship, so I agreed to make Sylvia as comfortable as possible. Meanwhile, George rented a place near his office saying, "I can't relax at home, and the commute is killing me." He barely came back home. My in-laws started advising me, "Cordelia, leave that idiot soon. We're sorry you got stuck with our foolish son." But I chose to stay, telling them, "I may have lost respect for George as a husband, but I consider you two like my real parents, and I want to help." We all started crying, touched by each other's sentiments. George, who came home once in a while, would sarcastically sigh upon seeing me and complain, "Why are you dressed like that? And the house is a mess." I'm dressed this way because it's easier to care for Sylvia, and the house is just as clean as before with Ted's help. "Don't make Dad help. Why are you even living here if you're making him do the work?" You say that, but this is a big house. Cleaning it every day by myself is, ugh! I didn't realize you'd be this lazy. I was giving you extra money for living expenses because I thought you were doing a good job with caregiving. That's going to change next month.
Wait a minute, why would you do that?
Because you're not doing your job when it comes to taking care of Mom. If you slack off on that, I'll divorce you.
George said this, ignoring anything I had to say. He just spoke his piece and went back to his own home. Originally, the money George gave for living expenses wasn't enough for my in-laws, and Ted had been making up the difference. George's announcement is a big blow to me. That night, I was wondering how to convince George otherwise. Ted noticed and asked me,
Is something wrong?
I hesitated, but decided to tell the truth that the situation was out of my control. Actually, George told me he's cutting our living expenses because he thinks I'm not working hard enough here. I was thinking about how to persuade him.
Slacking off? You? That's impossible. We're comfortable in our own home thanks to you. Don't worry about the money.
But you're already helping us out, Ted.
I couldn't stand the idea of us living off that foolish son's money anyway. We have plenty of savings, we'll be fine.
As I looked into it, Ted indeed had ample assets and we wouldn't have any financial issues. I decided to take his word for it and give up on talking to George. But then, one day, Ted suffered a stroke and passed away. At the funeral, I was confronted by George's sister, Roseanne, who shocked me with her words. I'm inheriting this house, so please leave. What? No way! As I was at a loss for words, George intervened.
What do you mean inheriting the house? Dad hardly had any money left, and I should also have a right to inherit the house.
Well, I'm leaving all the cash to you, George, and taking this old dingy house for myself. Even if we sell it, it won't fetch more than the cash. Roseanne's words silenced George, and that was the end of the inheritance talk. Within a few days of the funeral, we were kicked out of the house. Sylvia and I moved into a place that Roseanne had prepared for us, almost as if it was her last act of kindness. The new place was a condo. As I stood in front of our new home, Roseanne told me the truth. I'm sorry for leaving everything to you up until now. Dad actually told me everything and I was making plans. But before I could act on them, Dad passed away. That's why I had to talk to you in that way. What do you mean? Moving into this fully accessible condo has clearly made taking care of Sylvia a whole lot easier. Most of Dad's inheritance went into buying this place. He put it in Mom's name so she'd be secure no matter what happened to him. He was about to explain all this to you, but then he got sick. I'm sorry we couldn't talk about it sooner. What should I do now? If you're up for it, I'd love for you to continue taking care of Mom here. We'll pay you for caregiving, of course. And if you're tired of it, that's fine too. I know you've been reluctant, but Dad set aside money for all the caregiving you've done so far. Hearing Roseanne's words, I broke down in tears. I had no idea Ted went to such lengths. And here I am, unable to even thank him. Don't be silly! You've been holding down the fort, taking care of our parents all by yourself, while not even divorcing that idiot of a brother I have. Roseanne hugged my shoulders and smiled. Want to come in? Later, Roseanne told me in detail how Ted had bought the condo and transferred it to Sylvia's name through a living will. Apparently, Ted missed his chance to tell me because he was being cautious around George. I then told her I considered them my real family and I wanted to care for Sylvia as a way of giving back. We agreed, and so began our new life. I started looking for certifications I could earn from home and continue to take care of Sylvia. But ever since Ted's passing, Sylvia's health gradually worsened. We even took some stress-free trips hoping it would help. I hadn't heard from George since the funeral, and the monthly allowance had stopped. Once, Sylvia tearfully apologized, saying, I'm so sorry, Cordelia. You've wasted your life taking care of me. Sylvia, I've told you before. I'm grateful to be able to take care of you. Please don't apologize anymore, I responded, aiming to make the most of our remaining time together. Despite our efforts, Sylvia's health didn't improve. She was admitted to the hospital and passed away a few days later.
At her funeral, I encountered George, who had faded from my memory. He showed up with a garishly made-up woman and said, "Thanks for the caregiving. I was only with you for Mom's sake. Now I'm finally free. I've got a real family now, a new woman and child. I'm divorcing you." "What do you mean?" "I've got a kid, something you could never give me, and now I've got a family to protect." "Oh, okay. But you'll regret this." "Regret? Not a chance." George was grinning when he said that to me and was about to leave the funeral home. Just then, Roseanne said, "You know, we're reading Mom's will with the lawyer later, right? Don't you want to know what it says?" The woman with him, barely hiding her smirk, intertwined her arm with George's and said, "We might as well stick around and listen." So off we went to my in-laws' house. Once all the family was gathered, the will was read. It stated that the inheritance would go to Roseanne and me. George, hearing this, blew up. "What's the meaning of this? I can understand my sister's name being here, but why is Cordelia's name listed and not mine, her own son?" He grabbed my hair in anger. Roseanne's husband quickly intervened, and the woman George brought along spoke up. "So there's a will. That doesn't mean there isn't something for everyone, right?" She looked at the lawyer, still smirking. "George, you are disqualified from inheriting anything." The room went silent. "What are you talking about?" The lawyer continued. "George, didn't you promise to take care of Sylvia so she'd leave you more in her will? You even threatened her and kicked her bed to ensure she wouldn't change it." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You did what? That's unthinkable." "I never did such a thing. Stop lying. Are you trying to scam me out of my mother's inheritance?" George yelled back at me. Then the lawyer calmly said, "No lies here. We have evidence." He played audio of George threatening Sylvia and a video of him kicking her bed. The footage came from a camera that Ted and I had set up to make sure Sylvia didn't have an accident. Roseanne whispered, "Dad only removed his footage so it wouldn't trouble you, Cordelia." "Based on these pieces of evidence, it's clear that George attempted to fraudulently influence the creation of the will through threats and intimidation. Therefore, he is disqualified from inheriting." "But we have kids. This has nothing to do with them, right?" the woman interjected again. At her words, one of the male relatives shouted, "Can you outsiders please keep quiet?" But without flinching, the woman retorted, "I am no outsider. I have his child." "But that child was conceived during our marriage, so it's a child born out of an affair, correct?" Upon hearing my stern inquiry, the woman paused for a moment, then glared at George. "We've known about your relationship for quite some time. We even hired a private investigator, so we have all the evidence we need. We'll be seeking a substantial settlement from both of you. Oh, and by the way, you haven't been keeping up with the support payments, so expect to hear from us on that as well." Hearing the lawyers and my words, the family turned condemning eyes towards George. One male relative yelled, "Get out! What do you think of your wife and mother?" George, feeling the weight of the situation, left without making eye contact with anyone. A few days later, the divorce was finalized through the lawyer, and I received the settlement as planned. We also sent a detailed report along with videos of Sylvia being threatened and the reading of the will to the women's family home. It turns out that Sylvia's family was quite prominent, and George had been pushing me into caregiving for her with her inheritance in mind. While I regret not recognizing what kind of man he was sooner, I remain thankful for the time spent with my wonderful in-laws. George and his accomplice had been living under the assumption that they would inherit something, but now they're drowning in debt due to the claims against them. Moreover, after receiving the videos we sent, the woman's parents were furious and severed ties with her, leaving her with no one to turn to. Apparently, Roseanne and the other relatives have been contacted, but needless to say, they've declined any involvement. Fortunately, George was unaware of the condominium where I spent my last days with Sylvia, so there's been no direct harm to me.
Although I could live off Sylvia's inheritance, I've found myself wanting to work and am now employed at a caregiving facility. Roseanne joked with me saying, "You've just finished taking care of Mom and now you're starting a caregiving job?" Regardless, I'm living a fulfilling life every day.
This house is mine. I paid for it. Get out. You won't survive without me on your part-time wages. Ha ha ha. Henry sneers and gleefully unfolds the divorce papers. My name is Olivia and I'm 33 years old. Recently, I started working part-time at a nearby grocery store. I met Henry, my husband, at work. We got close, married 3 years ago, and I left my job soon after. Even though I wanted to continue working after marriage, Henry insisted that I become a homemaker. I reluctantly agreed, but couldn't shake off the desire to work again. After daily persuasion, Henry finally allowed me to work part-time. We want kids, but haven't been blessed yet. I wanted a pet and suggested getting a cat, but Henry hates them, so I gave up on the idea. Ever since I started working part-time, Henry criticizes everything I do. Did you go to work again today? The house is getting messy. Look at those wrinkled clothes. You're not keeping up with the chores. That's not true. I clean before going to work and the laundry is fine. What are you talking about? I've been managing everything perfectly. Henry retorts, the place looks dirty. Are you blind? And why is it always fried chicken? Can't you make something else? I don't make fried chicken that often. I try to vary our meals. I made your favorite fried chicken despite being short on time. I've prepared a variety of dishes. Henry doubles down when I push back. So, you're blaming your part-time job? Don't act so high and mighty. I earn enough for both of us. Do your chores properly and stop making excuses. It's embarrassing to see you work so hard for such a low wage. Henry always belittles me and my job. He wanted me to be a homemaker to maintain his image, not because we needed the money. He disapproves of my part-time job and takes every opportunity to mock me, asserting his financial superiority to unleash his verbal abuse. Even though he's my husband, I can't stand it when he degrades my work with harsh words. His words were ruining my mood every day. One day, we decided to go on a long-awaited drive to his parents' house. I had been irritated with him for a while, but I thought this outing would be a good break, so I was happy. At the time, I couldn't imagine that the visit to my in-laws would turn out the way it did. We drove for a few hours and finally arrived at his parents' home, where his mom was waiting for us. His mom, who lives alone, greeted us warmly. We had dinner prepared by her, and then my husband left to play poker. As his mom and I were doing the dishes, I noticed her demeanor change. She had been calm, but now her expression was stern. Wondering what was wrong, I made some coffee, and we sat down on the sofa. Then she spoke up. "Olivia, Henry told me you've been working part-time. Why do you need to work when Henry has a good job? And it sounds like you're not taking care of the house because of it." I was taken aback by her sudden questions. "No, that's not true. I'm doing my part-time at home." She widened her eyes dramatically. "I heard everything from Henry about how poorly you keep the house. Lying won't help. Henry has been suffering alone. He comes home to a dirty house after a hard day's work. You're even failing at cooking decent meals. Quit your part-time job. No one at your workplace would even care if you left. Your job is to be a homemaker. Don't embarrass yourself as Henry's wife." She's an old-fashioned woman who got married right after school and has never worked outside the home. My husband also believes that's what a wife should be like. That's why they both dislike the idea of me working. But her words were too much. I felt devastated by her heartless comment that my job doesn't matter and that no one would miss me if I left. I find my part-time job rewarding and everyone there is nice. They treat me well and rely on me. Tears filled my eyes as I couldn't believe they thought so little of me. What shocked me even more was that my husband was talking badly about me behind my back. I do manage our home. Actually, because of my part-time job, I've been putting in more effort to manage the house well. I know my husband's job is tough, so I've been doing my best to support him. But to think that he and his mom were talking bad about me over the phone, I just couldn't believe it. I was quite depressed for a few days, but then I remembered my dad's face. Ever since Mom passed away, he's been living alone in our family home. I haven't seen him for a while because I've been busy. I felt like hearing his voice, so I called him. Usually, he picks up right away, but that day the phone kept ringing. When I started to worry about why he wasn't picking up the phone, finally Dad answered. "Olivia, long time no see. How have you been?" Hearing Dad's calm voice, I felt relieved and tears started to flow. "What's going on? You didn't pick up for a while. Should I call back later if you are busy?" It seemed like Dad was out of breath. "No, sorry about that. I fell down the stairs recently and hurt my back. I can only move slowly right now, but it's nothing to worry about. I'll be fine soon. More importantly, is everything okay with you?" I was genuinely shocked. I couldn't believe that my athletic dad had fallen down the stairs and hurt his back. "No, I'm fine. Just please take it easy and get better soon. I'll come visit you before long." Though Dad kept saying he was fine, I started to worry. He's getting up there in age, and injuries could take a long time to heal. I had always taken his vitality for granted, but now I was anxious. Climbing stairs every day means there's always a chance he might trip and fall. On top of that, the stairs at my childhood home are pretty steep. The house is old, too, which means there are high steps leading into the entrance and bathroom. I became increasingly worried about Dad navigating the house while nursing his back. What if he seriously injured himself? I couldn't stand the thought. I had always wished to live closer, and now it seemed there was no time to hesitate. I made a significant decision to build a safer, more comfortable house for Dad near me. I had a hidden source of income that even my husband didn't know about. I had inherited an apartment business from my grandpa. Though technically it should belong to Dad, he had put it in my name for just-in-case scenarios. Dad always told me it's best not to talk about this, so even my husband doesn't know. I had saved all the rental income up until now. With that money, I could build Dad a new home. I've always been a worry for my dad, never really been able to give back to him. Now, I finally have a chance to give him the best gift of his life. The thought made my heart soar. However, building a new house would cost a significant amount, so I first needed my husband's understanding. I was on pins and needles, expecting another complaint and a big no. But instead, the response was, "You know, you might be right. Considering our age, maybe a new home is a better idea." Far from opposing, he graciously agreed. "Just don't come crying to me if you can't actually pull it off," he said, undermining me once again. Though it made me mad, I didn't want another fight, so I let it go. Now, the path was clear. I immediately started to search for reputable contractors and pushed ahead with the plans, though my husband didn't seem pleased. He didn't complain, but I could tell he wasn't fond of the idea. Then, one day, I was shocked when I went to the bank to withdraw money for groceries. $3,000 was missing from our account. I was shocked to see $3,000 missing from our joint account. I didn't remember spending that much money. There was only one person who could have done this. It was hard to believe my husband would take money without asking, but the reality was that the money was gone. That night, I confronted him. "Hey, I went to the bank today and $3,000 was withdrawn from our living expenses account. Do you know anything about this?" My husband smugly replied, "I gave it to my mom. You were talking about building a house, right? You must be stashing money somewhere. What's the big deal with $3,000? I couldn't believe my ears. "Why did you have to give her the money? It's not like my mother-in-law is broke. And that money is for our living expenses. You can't just give it away without asking me. That's totally unfair." My husband snapped back. "What do you know about my mom? She said she's struggling. What's wrong with a son helping his mother? Besides, I earned that money. What I do with it is none of your business. If you're upset, go earn your own money part-time. See, you've got nothing to say. Don't ever complain about what I do again." He shouted and stormed out of the room. I had always believed that even if my husband had a bad temper, he wouldn't betray me. It would have been better if he had just discussed giving money to his mother with me. Perhaps there was another way, and this fight could have been avoided. Was it that he thought I would object? Or did he not trust me? I felt like our marriage was getting worse, not better. The next day, my husband acted like nothing had happened and went to work. I didn't want to argue anymore, but the bad feeling lingered. Finally, our new home was completed. Thanks to a helpful construction company, we managed to build a beautiful home. I had arranged for a moving company to help my dad with the packing. Everything seemed to be going well. With just 2 weeks left until the moving day, I was brimming with joy at the thought of honoring my parents in the home I built. The plan for the big day was to go to the new house with my husband to help my dad unpack. But when we sat down to discuss the day's schedule, my husband dropped an unbelievable bombshell. "Hold on, that house isn't for your dad. I'm giving it to my mom. I have the right to decide who lives there." I was stunned. "That house is for my dad. I built it." Rushing my words, he retorted, "You, working part-time, could never afford to build a house. I built that house with my money." He seemed to genuinely believe he had paid for the house. Was his agreement to build the house in the first place because he intended it for his mother, not my dad? His behavior was appalling. Now, I had to prove that the house was built with my money. I had no choice but to reveal the rental income I had been silently earning. When I told my husband about my decision, he didn't believe me. "You're making up a crazy story just to get the house the way you want it. Why not come up with a better lie while you're at it?" And no one believed me, so my husband stormed off somewhere. I didn't know what to do, but I figured the only option was to keep explaining until they understood. With that thought in mind, I anxiously awaited his return, and when he finally came back, he looked furious. Then he blurted out, "You are trying to scam me," he yelled, "saying you built the house. That's my house. I built it. Pack your bags and get out. You won't survive on your part-time job salary. Ha ha ha." I was stunned, at a loss for words. It was too much, too fast. I had built that house, and being told to leave was shocking. "Sign this and be gone by tonight," my husband said, throwing the divorce papers on the table and walking away. His part was already filled out. After mocking me all this time, pushing a divorce paper in my face like I'm beneath him, that's just despicable. He must have done this awful act to bring me to despair. He probably thought that by bringing up divorce, I'd back down and let his mother move into our home. Sadly for him, I have enough income to sustain myself even without him. I reached my boiling point. I signed the divorce papers and left, heading to my dad's place with all my stuff. Dad was surprised but welcomed me warmly. "Come on in." After I told him everything, he patted me on the back. "Then let's live together in a new home. I'd be happier that way." He said just that. Moving day came and everything went smoothly, probably because my arrival spanned up preparations. Although it felt eerie how my husband didn't make a fuss despite all his previous claims about the house being his, I tried not to think about it. Then, a few days into my new life with Dad, something unbelievable happened. Curious about the noise outside, I looked out the window. A moving truck had parked right in front of our house. Turns out, this is their new home. When I asked what was going on, I learned that my husband was the client and he'd be arriving with his mother soon. My dad and I already live in this house, and it looks like he's planning on moving in uninvited. We're already divorced, so he's practically a stranger now. We don't want him barging in. His pushy attitude creeped me out, so I told the movers to halt and rang up the police after consulting with my dad. After explaining the situation to the officers, they confirmed that not only did he have no right to live here, but even stepping foot inside against my will was illegal trespassing. Just then, my husband and mother-in-law strolled in, all relaxed. Upon seeing the police officer, they both started to panic and get flustered. It seemed like it finally dawned on my husband that I had built this house. But between a panicking mother-in-law at his side and a barrage of questions from the officer, he had already lost his composure. "Why can't I live here? What's going on?" He raised his voice, desperately trying to resist. Watching my husband act like that, I felt done dealing with him, but to protect me and my dad, I quietly handed my trump card to the police. Thanks to the cops, the situation was diffused, but he found himself in a pickle. He had already given up his apartment, so now he was stuck with a ton of belongings and nowhere to go. I was worried about my husband's repeated verbal abuse, or in other words, evidence of domestic violence. For quite some time, I couldn't stand his harsh words anymore. I'd planned to get back at him someday, so I installed surveillance cameras around the house and recorded everything. The footage showed me diligently doing housework and my husband relentlessly hurling unreasonable insults. Thanks to this evidence, I managed to corner him even further. I hired a lawyer and initiated a lawsuit, eventually securing a financial settlement in the divorce. My husband spent all his savings, the money from selling the family home and the settlement money on moving and compensating me. Now, it seems he's living in a rundown apartment with his mother. Word spread quickly at his workplace. Colleagues who noted something off about his character started to distance themselves, leaving him isolated and scorned by everyone in the company. As for me, I finally got the cat I've always wanted. Dad's back is much better now. And we are even talking about taking a trip with the cat. I also used the settlement money to start a business that sells cat-related products. While the initial phase had its ups and downs, the customer base has slowly grown and the business is doing well. Life is peaceful and genuinely enjoyable every day. I never thought the steps I took for Dad's well-being would also lead to my own happiness. I truly feel it was the right decision. And there's another recent development that's made me happy. There's a man who frequently visits my shop and always has delightful conversations with me. He is a wonderful person, kind to both people and cats. We've planned to go for a drive together soon. I'm going to live my life freely and joyfully. The anticipation of new happiness ahead has my heart soaring.